welcome to the vulnerability analysis section. So we covered scanning and we managed to discover a bunch of information about our target, and right now we're going to use that information to discover whether a target has some vulnerabilities. We're going to cover 3 different tools in this section, and the first one is going to be an already familiar tool, which is called Nmap. We're going to tackle a subject on Nmap scripting. By now, we learned that Nmap is used for scanning targets. But Nmap can also perform vulnerability analysis, and in some cases it can even perform exploitation with the help of different scripts. As this is advanced use of Nmap, we should first explain what are these Nmap scripts. Well, Nmap scripts are commonly used in scanning to detect different service vulnerabilities. It can also be used for brute forcing attacks. It can be used to detect a malware on target machine. It is also used to collect even more information about databases and other network services. So we can consider this lecture to be half scanning and half vulnerability analysis. The goal of this lecture, however, will not be the vulnerability analysis, but to show you how we can run these scripts. And before we even run them, we need to know what are our available options. So, where are those scripts? How do we run them? How do we know which scripts even exist? Inside of the Kali Linux, we can find all the scripts that Nmap has inside of this directory. So, open up your terminal and navigate to user share /nmap and then /scripts. If I type ls right here, we can see there are a lot of them. Let us test some of them out and see whether they give us any information about our target. Now, running scripts comes with 2 different options. We can either specify one script to use in a scan, or we can specify a group of scripts that we will use inside of a scan. And to fully understand all the possible things that we can do with scripts using Nmap, you should take a look at this page right here. This is the official Nmap page from the nmap.org link, and in the /book/nseusage.html, it will give us a good explanation about script groups and the usage of Nmap. If I scroll all the way down, here is the usage and examples. We get different script categories, which are script groups. We can see right here that the currently defined categories are auth, broadcast, brute, default, discovery, and many more right here. And down here we can read about each and every one of them to see what each script group does. So for example right here, the brute script group, it says these scripts are used to brute force attacks to guess authentication credentials of a remote server. Nmap contains scripts for brute forcing dozens of protocols, including HTTP brute, Oracle brute, SNMP brute, and so on and so on. Let us test some of them out. Let us start with this auth script group first. We can read these scripts deal with authentication credentials or bypassing them on the target system. Examples include X11 access, FTP anonymous, and Oracle enum users. Now these right here that you read are single script names. And these single scripts belong to this larger script group. Right here it also says scripts which use brute force attacks to determine credentials are placed in the brute category instead. So right here there are no scripts that are used for brute forcing. And what brute forcing simply means is running a bunch of usernames and passwords onto the target system to discover which one is the correct username and which one is the correct password. But more about brute forcing later on. For now, let us go and test some of these scripts. To run a scan with a script group, we can use nmap --script, and after it, we specify the script group. So in my case, I will use auth, and I will scan my metasploitable machine with the synscan. Remember, synscan requires sudo privileges, so let's add sudo and type in our password. As soon as it finishes, we're going to see whether this auth script group discovered any useful information for us regarding vulnerabilities. Okay, so it has finished. Let us see whether our script managed to detect anything unusual. So we get the standard output of all the open ports, and we also get some other information for some of the ports. For example, right here we get FTP anon, and this FTP anon is just a single script name from the nmap. It tells us that anonymous FTP login is allowed. What does this mean? Well, this is something that we will cover later. For now on, just keep in mind that anonymous login is allowed for the port 21. Under the SSH port, we get which authentication methods are supported, right here. Down here we get information for the SQL port. It tells us that root account has empty password. This can also be very useful for us. And right here we can see Tomcat, Tomcat. What does this mean? Well, this looks like a default Tomcat credentials. And if I go down here, it tells us post-scan script results. It says that this is a valid credential for Tomcat. It is for the service running on this port. Let us check this out. This might be the first vulnerability that we find. To check whether this is correct, we can go and open up Firefox. And we're going to make a connection to our Metasploitable on this port right here. So just find out the IP address of your Metasploitable, and if you scanned it right now, you already know it. So for me, it is 192.168.1.6. And to make a connection to a port, I will type 2 dots and then the port number. In my case, what seems to be a vulnerability is found on this port. So let's copy the port, and I will paste it right here. Oops. It seems that it only pasted the port. Let me just retype this and type the port like this. So 8180, and then visit this. And here we get the official Apache Tomcat page. Let's see whether we can find something interesting right here. And what we're looking for based on these credentials is a login screen. So this Tomcat administration seems interesting. If I click on it, it leads us to this admin page where we are required to specify username and password. And down here from our scan, we got Tomcat and Tomcat. Let's try it out and see whether it fits. If I type Tomcat for the username and Tomcat for the password, click on login. There it is. We managed to log in to the admin page of the Tomcat server. Great. This is our first vulnerability that we managed to discover and exploit. We are now in the administrator page of the Tomcat. Now, there are other things that we can do right here as well, but for now, we're just happy that we managed to gain access to the administrator page. Down here we have user databases, mail sessions, data sources, and these are all empty because this is a test machine. But if it was a real machine, this would probably all be filled with some other useful information. Great, let's leave this on side for now. So we managed to gain access to the Tomcat administrator page with the help of nmap script. Let's see what else we can do with scripts. So let's go and try out the malware scan. These scripts test whether the target platform is infected by malware or backdoors. Let's see whether our target is infected with malware. We can run the same command, just this time instead of auth, we're going to use malware. Let's run the scan. And let me Control-C this just so we can make this faster. I'm going to use the -F option to scan only 100 ports and not 1000 ports. And it doesn't seem to find any malware right here. But what you can do with this scan, you can wait for us to first exploit the Metasploitable in the next section, and then test this scan once again to see whether you can notice any backdoors that we uploaded that are making connection to our Cal Linux machine. For now, it doesn't seem to give us any result for the first 100 ports. Let's try another scan. We're going to use right now the banner script group. And what banners are simply what the open port will give us as the information once we connect to it. Banners usually hold information disclosure, and by information disclosure they can give us the exact version of the software running on an open port. And we can see the scan has finished, and we get the banner which holds the version for the FTP. We get the banner for the SSH that also holds the version. And this is something similar for the version scan that we covered in Nmap. Now, sometimes banner will look something like this, and this is something that we cannot read. But I will show you in the exploitation section that this telnet port is one of the easiest ports to exploit and gain access to Metasploitable. And we are going to do this over banner. For now, it seems that we cannot even read this banner, but later we're going to use the exact same banner for telnet to gain access to the Metasploitable. Let's check out another scan. Let's try this scan group, and this scan group is called exploit. And while it runs, if I go right here and try to find that scan group, it tells us that the scripts that belong to this exploit scan group aim to actively exploit some vulnerability. Here are some of the examples of the script names that belong to the group. So this script group will actually try to exploit if it finds a vulnerability. Let's see whether it finished, and it did finish. Right here we can see port 80. Spidering limited to this found the following possible CSRF vulnerabilities. So here are the possible vulnerabilities that it found for this specific vulnerability. And from now on, don't worry about this type of vulnerabilities for the HTTP port we are going to cover in the website penetration testing section. For now, we're just taking a look at how we can discover them using vulnerability analysis. Let's go all the way up, and for the FTP port, it tells us right here that the port is vulnerable. It is running this version, and it seems that it managed to exploit it, as it says right here, vulnerable and exploitable. And right here we get the exploit results. The Nmap script ran this command, and it actually managed to get the root account on the target machine. So we found another vulnerability. Here is the FTP port that is exploitable. Now, we don't really know how to exploit it yet, but for now, with the help of scripts and vulnerability analysis, we know that this right here is exploitable. And in the exploitation section, we're going to see exactly how we can gain access and perform the same thing that the Nmap performed right here. Now, under these IDs, you will see this name right here. Now, get used to these type of names. This is how different vulnerabilities are labeled. This 2011 is a year when the vulnerability occurred. Okay, great. But these are just some of the script groups that we can run. Of course, we're not going to be running all of them in this video, since as you see right here, there is a lot of them. You can test them out and see what each and every one of them do. But for now, let us just see how we can run one script. We saw how we can run script groups, but sometimes you will only want to run a single script. And we already know that scripts are located inside of this directory, right here. And there is a lot of them. Let's go all the way up and try to find some cool script. This one seems interesting. Firewall bypass. And this .nse is just the extension for the scripts. And by the way, do not blindly run these scripts. What you can do to check out what exactly a certain script does is you can copy its name and then run the command sudo nmap --script -help and then the name of the script. So paste the script name and type enter. It will tell us that this particular script detects a vulnerability in NetFilter and other firewalls that use helpers to dynamically open ports for protocols such as FTP and SIP. Right here it also tells us how the script works. So the script works by spoofing a packet from the target server, asking for opening a related connection to a target port. And to run it, in case you want to run it, you can type sudo nmap --script, and it is similar to running the script groups. All we need to do is just paste the name of the script and add the IP address. It will start running this script onto the target, and for now it seems that we got the exact same output of a normal nmap scan. Usually you will get this output. That means the script didn't work. So since this one didn't seem to give any output, let's try another one. Let's try the one that we already know will give us an output, and that one is ftp anon.nse. And remember when we ran one of the script groups? This script gave us the output for the FTP port, telling us that anonymous FTP login is allowed. Let's see whether we get the same result right now. If I run it, go all the way up, and it tells us anonymous FTP login allowed. And I already told you that FTP anonymous login means that you can use anonymous username and a random password to log into the FTP. Let's see whether it will work. Let's just test it out. We are curious. We want to see what does this anonymous FTP login mean. To do that, we're going to connect to a target using FTP. So you just type FTP and then the IP address of the target machine, in our case of the Metasploitable, press enter, and right here it will ask us for the name. Let's type anonymous, and let's type the password. Here you can type anything you want. In my case I will just type password 123 and press enter, and here it is, login successful. Remote system type is Unix, and now we can use the help command to see what are our available options inside of this FTP server. So we can run these commands right here. Great, it seems that FTP anonymous login is indeed allowed. But once again, more about FTP and the FTP vulnerabilities that we discovered in the exploitation section. For now, we managed to find out about some potential vulnerabilities, such as the Tomcat administrator login. The FTP port 21 showed to also be vulnerable. Remember when we ran the exploit script group, it told us that it is exploitable. But let's also see what else we can find using other vulnerability analysis tools. Welcome back. And in this video, I want to show you something that you will do every time you perform a penetration test. I want to show you how to manually search for vulnerabilities. And this is something that you will do a lot. You will use this more than any other tool that we covered. So what manual vulnerability analysis is us simply Googling the vulnerabilities. For example, suppose we are attacking a target, and right here I just performed the version scan for the Metasploitable. Imagine Metasploitable is our target, and we just performed this version scan. We got these different ports open and different versions. How do we know if they are vulnerable without using any tool? Well, what we can do is we can copy the name of the version that is running on an open port, then go to Google and just paste that name and add exploit. And here it is. We're already getting some response back. Python exploit for this version, which is the exact version that our Metasploitable has. vsftpd, the exact version that we have. Backdoor command execution. And what you would do is you would just go to these links and try to find the exploit for it. Down here we already see that an exploit already exists. For which platform it is, we can see right here the source code if we want to. And here it is. The exploit is coded in Python in this case. And this is how you would do most of your vulnerability analysis. We also get the module options, and what these module options are is something that we will cover in the exploitation section. This is how we can exploit the target using tools. We're going to cover that shortly. For now on, this is the way that you can find out how to exploit the target. You just go through a bunch of links and see whether someone already came up with the exploit for that specific version. In this case, for the vsftpd 2.3.4 version. And you would do this for any version that you discover. For example, you can go right here, Apache HTTPD, and copy the version. Make sure that you copy the number as well, which in our case is 2.2.8. Then go and paste the name of that version. Add exploit, and here we already get some output. Security vulnerabilities. If we click on it, we can see all of the vulnerabilities that this version of Apache has. Right here we can see which score they have, and the higher the score, the stronger the vulnerability. Right here we can see the vulnerability ID, which, remember from the last video, I told you this format is used for vulnerabilities and you will see it a lot. And we can see all the vulnerabilities that it has. This one particularly we are really interested in. Why? Well, because it has the score 10. That means that it is a really strong vulnerability, most likely execution of code or remote access to the target. And it indeed is. It says right here, code execution. And if you click on it, you can see what this vulnerability does. You can see confidentiality impact is complete, integrity impact complete, availability impact complete. There is a total shutdown of the affected resource. The attacker can render the resource completely unavailable. So this also seems like some kind of a DOS attack. And down here we can see that this will most likely work only for Windows. As I'm noticing Windows right here a lot. Windows right here, Windows right here. Now of course you would read through this a little bit more detailed, but for now this doesn't seem as an exploit that would work on our Metasploitable, because Metasploitable is running on Linux. And this is what you would do most of your time, researching for vulnerabilities. This is how you find them, and then you search for the exploit created by someone else that you can use to exploit the target. Another thing that you can do is you can use a tool inside of the Cal Linux called searchsploit. And searchsploit, if I type --help, simply takes the input of the version of software, and then it searches through Cal Linux database through all of the exploits that Cal Linux has and tries to find an exploit that will work for that specific version. Right here we have some usage examples, but we don't need to perform these complicated commands. All we can do is copy, for example, some version. Let's say we copy this version of software, Unreal IRC, and copy this. And what we can do once we copy that version is type searchsploit and then paste the version name. And we get the result. It will tell us right here there are already some existing exploits for the Unreal IRC. We also get which version are the exploits for. One of them are backdoor command execution. The second one is local configuration stack overflow. We also get the denial of service exploit. And on the right side, we get the path to those exploits. Right here, this one is under Linux remote and it is named 16922.rb. And this RB simply stands for Ruby. This is coded in Ruby language. One of them is for Windows, one of them is for Linux. Since we're running Metasploitable, we would only be interested in the Linux exploits. So let's try to navigate here. How we can find this exploit? Well, we can copy the name of the exploit and use locate command to find where exactly this exploit is located on our machine. And it is in this path right here. So you can copy to this directory, cd, and then paste the directory name. And if I were to nano 16922.rb, this will open an exploit that we would use to attack that Unreal IRC open port. As we can see, it also tells us that this is a backdoor program. This file is also part of Metasploit framework, and Metasploit framework is one of the biggest tools that we are going to cover in the next section. We'll cover all of the basics of it, and we will also cover how we can run exploits and attack different machines using this Metasploit framework. Okay, cool. We found an exploit for this specific software using searchsploit. So now we know we got exploit for that version of software that we have on our Metasploitable. So this is usually how you would perform most of your vulnerability analysis. You either use tools like searchsploit or you manually try to find an exploit on Google to see whether anyone has exploited it before, and if they have, how did they do that? You would also use Nmap scripts sometimes, but I personally rarely use Nmap scripts for vulnerability analysis. And the last tool that we are going to cover for the vulnerability analysis is going to be Nessus, which we will see in the next section. That tool is huge and you will use it a lot in your vulnerability analysis. See you there. Welcome back. In this video, we're going to see how we can install a really useful tool for vulnerability analysis. Probably one of the best tools that perform this process automatically. It is very easy to use, and this tool is called Nessus. To get it running, we must first download and install it. So to do that, open up your Firefox. And in the search bar, we can type Nessus. If we scroll down to this tenable link that says download Nessus vulnerability assessment, we can click on it. And right here we're going to see two different versions of Nessus that we can download. We can get the free version that allows us to scan up to 16 IP addresses. And by the way, this Nessus Essentials will only allow us to scan inside of the network. You will not be able to scan external IP addresses using this. However, you will get high speed, in-depth assessment, free training and guidance, and support via Tenable community. Once you start performing real-life penetration tests, and you start scanning different companies, their networks, and so on, this Nessus Professional option will be really useful for you. It tells you right here you get unlimited assessments, you can scan unlimited IP addresses, you can use it anywhere, you get live results, configuration assessments, bunch of different things, but it also comes with a really expensive price. However, this is something that pays off once you perform real-life penetration tests. Okay, right now we are interested in the free version, so let us click download on the Nessus Essentials. So you can choose to register right here, or what else we can do is we can type Nessus download and download it straight away to our Cal Linux. We can click right here, download Nessus Tenable, and right here we are going to see different Nessus versions. In this case, since I'm running Cal Linux 64-bit, I'm interested in this Nessus Debian AMD 64. If I click on it, click on I agree, it will ask me whether I want to open or save the file. I want to save it, and it will download the file inside of my downloads directory. It will finish in just a few seconds. Here it is done, so let's click on this button right here. It will open our downloads directory, and once it opens up, we can lower this page right here and open terminal inside of the downloads directory. To install this, we can run sudo dpkg, which stands for dpackage, and then -i, which stands for install, and we can type the name of the Nessus. What you can do is you can just type capital N and then tab it to autocomplete it. Then press enter. It will ask me for the password. I will input it right here, and it will complete the installation process for us. Here it is, it finished in just a few seconds, and it tells us right here that we can start Nessus Scanner by typing this command. So let's just copy it right here. Let's run it, paste clipboard. Oh, we need to run it with user privileges, so let's type sudo and then paste the command. And it will tell us starting Nessus. Now, to go to Nessus, you need to copy this link right here. Copy the link, go to Firefox, open another page, we can close these two pages, and we can paste and go to that link. Let me enlarge this, and it will tell us potential security risk ahead. We don't really care about this, we know there is no risk right here, so click on Advanced and go down here, accept the risk and continue. Click on that. And this will start compiling plugins. This will take a few seconds, and soon it will ask us which version of Nessus we want to install. And we will also need to provide some additional information, such as email address and usernames and passwords. Here it is. Right here specify Nessus Essentials and click on Continue. Right here you will need to provide the first name, the last name, and the valid email address. Now, in case you don't use a valid one, you will not be able to use Nessus because it will send you the activation code to the email address that you specify right here. Now, since I already have an account, I will just skip this. And I will go and type my activation code right here. You should get this same window and the same question asked as soon as you specify the email address and the first and last name. Then you go to your email, find the activation code and type it in right here. Once you type your activation code, click on Continue, username and password. I will set right here Mr. Hacker, which is my username, and I will type in my password. It will ask you to set up your own username and to set up your own password. You can use whatever you want. After it, click on Submit. it will tell me setup is complete, and now it will start the true preparation for Nessus. This process right here will take some time, and by some time I think it might take even up to 30 or 14 minutes. So just take a small break until all of this is over, and we're going to continue with Nessus in the next video. Okay, that was loading for over an hour. But it is finally over, so we're ready to explore the Nessus tool. It is pretty simple to use. Your page should be blank since you haven't performed any scan yet. So we can click right here on this X button just to see better this page, and all we want to do from here is go to the new scan button. Right here we will see all of the available options that we can do for our scans. So we got basic network scan, as it says a full system scan suitable for any host. We got the advanced scan, configure a scan without using any recommendations, and we got a bunch of the other options, and for some of them we need the Nessus Professional version in order to use, such as this one, this one, this one, and all of these that have the upgrade on them. Now, as I already talked about, with Nessus Essentials, we're only going to be able to scan local IP addresses. Inside of a company, you could use this tool to scan their networks for vulnerabilities. However, you cannot scan an external IP address with this. So scanning a website is not going to work, unless it's inside of your network. Another thing to remind you is that we can scan with the free version up to 16 IP addresses. And if I'm not mistaken, those 16 IP addresses clean after 90 days, so after 90 days you will be able to scan more IP addresses, but I'm not sure about that. And if you have a free version and you have more than 16 targets, you will have to scan that network with multiple Nessus scans. So scanning big enterprise networks for big companies will require Nessus Professional version. But what we want to do here, to learn Nessus and how to use it, we want to go onto the basic network scan. And this basic scan will require us to specify some options. Now, for our first scan, we'll be scanning only Metasploitable. So, turn it on if you haven't already. Check out the IP address of Metasploitable. In my case, it is 192.168.1.4. And once you do that, we can proceed to specify our options. In the General tab, under the name, you can specify anything you want. I will simply just type Metasploitable. Under the description, I will just leave this empty, there is nothing really to specify here. You can put anything you want here, just so you can recognize which type of scan you did and on which target you did it. In the folder, we will leave it on My Scans, and in the targets, we specify the IP address of our target machine. Since right now we are only scanning one machine, we will specify the IP address of Metasploitable. But if you were to scan a network, you would specify something like this. 192.168.1.1/24, in case it is a /24 network. I believe you can also specify it like this, so dash 192.168.1.255. But right now, let us just go with our Metasploitable. And with the free version, we can't even scan 255 hosts. Remember, we can only scan 16. Once you specify this, we want to proceed to the Schedule tab. And here, this Schedule tab is useful once you want to schedule your scans on a certain period of time, or you just want to schedule a scan while you're doing something else on the side. For now, we're going to leave it off. Under the notifications, you can choose if you want to send results to some emails over SMTP server. We are not going to be doing that right now. In the Discovery tab, this is the important stuff. Here we choose how many and which ports we want to scan. We have an option of scanning common ports, and this is similar to Nmap default port scan. It will only scan most popular ports. Or you can select scan all ports, which we're going to use right now, to scan all 65,000 ports on our Metasploitable. And if you want, there is a custom option, which is the third option right here, but we're pretty satisfied with this scan all ports option. If we read the settings, the general settings always test the Nessus localhost, use fast network discovery. Under the port scanner settings, we have scan all ports, use netstat if credentials are provided, use SYN scanner if necessary, and we're pinging hosts using TCP ARP and ICMP. Good. Once you set this to scan all ports, you can go to the assessment, and in the assessment tab, we can choose what we want to scan for. So there are a few options. If I click right here on the scan type, we have scan for known web vulnerabilities, scan for all web vulnerabilities, and scan for all web vulnerabilities complex. For the purposes of this tutorial, we will be scanning for known web vulnerabilities. Why? Well, this will just take lesser time to finish. When you run scan for complex web vulnerabilities, it usually takes a lot more time. And we can see right here under the general settings, avoid potential false alarms, enable CGI scanning, and web applications, we will crawl up to 1000 pages, up to 6 directories, and we will test for known vulnerabilities in commonly used web applications. These are our assessment settings. But also keep in mind that if we discover some web vulnerabilities, we will see how to attack them in the web penetration testing section. That will come right after the exploitation section. For now, let us just see whether Nessus will find something juicy. Right after, we go to the report settings, and usually you want to leave this on default, so we're not going to be changing anything right here. And finally, in the advanced tab, we will leave it on default for now and proceed to click on save. So click on save right here, and you should have your scan right here. Now, you will notice that it does not automatically start. We must launch it. And we do that by clicking on this arrow right here, which says launch. Click on it. In just a few seconds, here it is. These green arrows will start spinning and our scan has officially started. This will try to discover all the vulnerabilities it can find for the Metasploitable machine. Now, keep in mind that these scans can take a lot longer than Nmap scans. You can always check the current state of scan by clicking on the scan name, in our case on the Metasploitable, and you will be able to see what it managed to find for now during the scan. Different vulnerabilities will be marked with different colors. We will have blue color, which means information disclosure, and what that is it possibly managed to find some information that should be private, or it managed to find the service version or something similar that allows us to find out more information about the target. It doesn't necessarily mean that the information is useful though. Then we have green, yellow and orange vulnerabilities, or also known as low, medium and high vulnerabilities. And at the end, we get the most interesting vulnerabilities, which are critical vulnerabilities. This usually includes remote code execution or something similar. So what you can also do, you can click on them, and this is just what it managed to find at this current point of scan. So we got one critical vulnerability for now. We got two mixed vulnerabilities, one medium vulnerability, and some information disclosure right here. Let's go back, and we're going to wait for this to finish, and once it's done, we will get back to it and see the results. Alright, it is finally over, and we can see, if I click on the scan, that it managed to discover a bunch of vulnerabilities. All kinds of them. Let us go through these results and see some of the vulnerabilities it found. Remember, we are most interested in critical and high vulnerabilities. Others can also be useful, but these two are the main ones. First thing we see is that it managed to find 7 critical vulnerabilities, 11 high vulnerabilities, 36 medium vulnerabilities, 7 low, and 148 information disclosure. Let us click on the scan. Right here we can order the vulnerabilities by their severity. So if I click on this arrow, it will go from the information to the critical, but mostly we are interested in critical vulnerabilities, so I will click it once again, and let's go with any one of them. We're going to see an example of each vulnerability. We're going to check one critical, one high, one medium, one low, and one information disclosure. Let's go, for example, with this one. So it says NFS exported share information disclosure. This is a critical vulnerability. Down here we can see the description, and it says at least one of the NFS shares exported by the remote server could be mounted by the scanning host. An attacker may be able to leverage this to read and possibly write files on remote host. It tells us what is the solution to fix this vulnerability, as it says configure NFS on the remote host, so that only authorized hosts can mount its remote shares. Down here it tells us where it found the vulnerability. It found it on our Metasploitable on the 2049 UDP port. And what you would do, for example, is you would then Google this vulnerability, which we learned in the previous video where we covered Googling vulnerabilities and search exploit, and you would see how you would exploit this. For now, we know that this exists. Let's check another critical vulnerability. Let's go, for example, onto this one, bind shell backdoor detection. It says a shell is listening on a remote port without any authentication being required. An attacker may use it by connecting to the remote port and sending commands directly. This seems like a really big problem. And we're going to see in the next section how we can actually gain access from this critical vulnerability. It is very, very easy, trust me. But these types of misconfiguration happen often. Down here we can see the solution, verify the remote host has been compromised and reinstall the system if necessary. And the actual vulnerability is found on the port 1524 over TCP. Now, since critical vulnerabilities are most important, let us check another one. Let's go on to this one. VNC server password is password. So it seems that we get the default credentials for some software running on our Metasploitable. As it says, the VNC server running on the remote host is secured with a weak password. And this type of vulnerability is something that you will find the most. Now, it doesn't have to be anything connected to the VNC server, but weak credentials are something that even the biggest companies have. And you can have all the security in the world, but if your password is weak, none of that security will matter. Down here we see the Nessus logged in using a password. And what port was it on? It was port 5900 over TCP. So we will see how we can exploit all of this, but let us also check out some other vulnerabilities as well. Apache Tomcat AGP connector request injection. Let's click on it. This seems to be a high vulnerability, and it tells us a file read inclusion vulnerability was found in AGP connector. A remote unauthenticated attacker could exploit this vulnerability to read web application files from a vulnerable server. It tells us that the solution is to actually upgrade the Tomcat server to the newer version. And down here it tells us over which port did it find the vulnerability, which is port 8009. On the right side we can also see some additional vulnerability information, such as what is the vulnerability for. It is for Apache Tomcat. Is the exploit available? Yes, the exploit exists for this, and they are available. The patch was published on March 1st, 2020, and vulnerability was also published on that same day, and Nessus managed to successfully exploit it. Reference information, and here are the vulnerability names. So you would just type this, search for an exploit for it, and you would manage to exploit the Metasploitable machine. Let's check out a few more vulnerabilities, and then we're going to wrap up with this tutorial. Let's go to a medium one, and let's go, for example, to this one, SMB sign-in not required. Sign-in is not required on the remote SMB server. An authenticated remote attacker can exploit this to conduct man-in-the-middle attacks against the SMB server. Now, we have not covered man-in-the-middle yet, but later in the course we will be devoting an entire section to this attack, to the man-in-the-middle attack. So for now, we just know that the SMB port, which is running on port 445, is vulnerable to the man-in-the-middle attacks. Okay, let us also check out some information disclosure. So right here we can see OpenSSL detection, service detection, GET request, SSL TLS version supported. So we can check out which SSL and TLS versions are supported. This plugin detects which SSL and TLS versions are supported by the remote service for encrypting communications. And this port seems to be running SSL version 2, SSL version 3, and TLS version 1. And these are just different protocols used for encryption of the data that is being transferred over this port. And once again, you will see that SSL is vulnerable to the man-in-the-middle attack. We can decrypt this data using that specific attack. However, don't worry if you fully don't understand what I'm talking about. This is once again something that we will cover in a later section. Okay, great. Do you see right now how amazing this NAS scanner is? It literally gave us most of the vulnerabilities just from a single scan. In the next section, we will see how to exploit most of these vulnerabilities on the Metasploitable, but on other targets as well. In the next video, we're going to scan other machine using NASes, and we're going to see what results we get. See you in the next video. Welcome back. In this video, I want to show you another example of a NAS scan. So in the previous one, we scanned our Metasploitable, which is a Linux machine. Right now, we're going to see what results can we get scanning a Windows machine. So I have right here Windows 7 virtual machine, and what's special about this machine is that it hasn't been updated in a year. And keep in mind, there are a lot of people in the world that don't regularly update their operating systems. This machine specifically doesn't have any additional software installed and running on open ports. The only open ports it has are these ones, and most of them are open by default once you install Windows 7. Let us see what our NAS scan will manage to find on an unupdated Windows 7 machine. So let's go right here and go on to new scan. We already know how we can perform the scan, so I will not be explaining the details. We navigate to the basic scan and we can type right here Windows 7. The IP address I checked out right here, it is 192.168.1.6, and if I scan it, go to the discovery, we can scan all ports. In the assessment, we're going to scan for known web vulnerabilities. In the report, we leave everything default, and in the advanced, we leave it on default. I will click on save, and I will just run my scan. This will start scanning my Windows 7 machine, and in a few minutes we will receive the entire scan and all the vulnerabilities it managed to find for our Windows 7 machine. Once again, keep in mind that it doesn't have any additional software installed. I just installed an operating system and connected it to my network. Let's wait for the scan to finish, and we're going to see what it will manage to find. Okay, the scan has finished. Let us check out the results that NAS gave us. If I click on my Windows 7, we will see it managed to find 4 critical vulnerabilities and 2 high vulnerabilities. And these are the vulnerabilities it found on Windows machine that hasn't been updated. Let us check them out. If I click on this and click on Microsoft Windows multiple issues, we will see 4 critical vulnerabilities. Unsupported Windows OS. This means that the Windows has not been updated, as it says right here, is either missing a service packet or is no longer supported. This simply means it hasn't been updated in a while. As a result, it is likely to contain security vulnerabilities, and that is true. We get the MS14, which it says right here, vulnerability in channel could allow remote code execution, uncredentialed check. And down here, we also get what type of vulnerability it is. So we could just search for that vulnerability, search for an exploit, and gain access to our Windows 7 machine. We also get this RDP, RCE, or also known as the Blue Keep attack. And as you can see right here, this attack is relatively new. It is from 2019. So for example, if there was anyone running Windows 7 that hasn't updated their machine since 2019, they are vulnerable to this attack. This attack exploits Remote Desktop Protocol, which is running over the port 3389. Cool, right? We managed to discover vulnerabilities and critical vulnerabilities for the Windows 7 machine. This NAS tool is really amazing. However, there are also some vulnerabilities that it didn't manage to find. And I'm talking about really high vulnerabilities. So it is finally time. In the next section, we're going to see how we can exploit a bunch of these vulnerabilities, how we can gain access to the target, steal information from the target. We will see also how we can maintain access on the target, and we will see how we can cover our tracks. See you in the exploitation section. Alright, let us cool down for a second. We have finished everything we could to gather information about our target. We performed information gathering and port scanning. We know which ports our target has open. We also know which softwares are running on those open ports, and what operating system does our target have. Then we performed vulnerability analysis, using different tools like Nessus and Nmap. One reminder that the best vulnerability analysis you can perform is you Googling, since some tools might fail to find vulnerability. It might not be in their database, but if you find out a version of a software and you Google it, if that software is vulnerable, it will most likely come up in some page. Now it is time to get our hands dirty. In the next video, we're going to see how we can exploit our Metasploitable machine and gain access to it. And we will also be attacking some other machines as well. All of these previous steps led to this final moment: hacking the target. Take a break if you need, and once you are ready, I will see you in the next section.